The surf crashed against the black shore of Dragonstone, each wave hissing through the jagged teeth of rock like a living thing in pain. Jon Snow stood upon the parapet of the ancient fortress, gloved fingers clenched around rain-slick stone, his cloak beating at his shoulders, as though it too wished to escape the night's gale. All day, the sky had wept a cold, relentless rain, but with dusk, the storm had thickened, lowering like iron upon the narrow sea. Lightning pulsed within it, silent for a beat. Then the thunder rolled across the keep and rattled the carved gargoyles above the doors. In the deepening gloom, Jon could make out the dim green glimmer of wildfire lanterns. Far below in the harbor, Asha Greyjoy's prize, a thin line of captured ships that lifted and sank at anchor with the rhythm of the tide. He tried to hold fast to the salt-stained air, to the scent of wet kelp and distant smoke, to anything that might tether him to the quiet truths that had once guided his life. Yet the truths were shifting sands now. Swept by currents far larger than honor or brotherhood, Rhaegal banked overhead, the great dragon's beating wings scattering sheets of silver rain. Green fire flashed between scaled jaws as the beast exhaled, not flame but a whitening steam that carried the brine of the sea. Rhaegal had sensed his rider's unease and circled the towers for half the night, restless, waiting. Jon's breath ghosted in the darkness. Somewhere behind him, in the labyrinthine halls, Daenerys Targaryen's courtiers still drank and plotted. The low hum of voices carried upward on eddies of lamp smoke, restless enough to touch even the ramparts. Jon tasted sour Dornish red on the wind and thought of Sir Davos' quiet question at supper. "Will there be justice, lad, for the children in the streets?" The Onion Knight's weather-worn face had been grave, lined like dry parchment, and Jon had answered only by looking away. He could not yet voice what churned within him. Not to Davos. Not to anyone. Footsteps scraped stone behind him. Tyrion Lannister emerged from a salt-black arch wearing a hooded mantle, half his face hidden in shadow. "You leave the hearth for the storm," he said. "Are you certain you are not still a Stark?" Jon refused the bait. "Have you spoken with her?" The dwarf's exhale trembled. "She is speaking with herself. And with a chorus of mirrors that tell the same tale. That the Iron Throne is her birthright. That mercy has burned away with every betrayal she has endured. She listens to no counsel but her own heart, and hearts, as you know, are poor masters." Lightning split the clouds again. For an instant, Jon glimpsed the sea laid bare. Miles of heaving pewter crowned in foam. "Tomorrow," he said, as much to himself as to Tyrion. "She rides for King's Landing at dawn. The unsullied march in silence. The Dothraki howl for retribution. And when the bells ring?" Tyrion's voice was barely audible above the wind. "Will she hear them this time?" Jon closed his eyes. He heard other bells, the broken knell from inside his skull. When he had killed the boy Ollie to keep his vow to the Watch, the savage clamoring in his heart when Sansa had placed the direwolf crown upon his brow, in the throne room of Winterfell. He had thought those choices beyond bearing, but they paled beside the one looming before him. "There will be no bells," he said at last. "She does not intend to give them time." A beat of silence, heavy as a tombstone. Tyrion's answer came slow, as though each word were dragged from him by an unseen hook. "Then the lion begs the wolf to remember that every city is full of children, and every child deserves more than ashes." Jon felt the truth of it burrow beneath his skin like splinters of dragon glass. He had stood upon the wall of Winterfell and watched bodies burn. He had listened to ghost howl for the dead, while the flame-ridden sky turned night into dawn. The memories did not fade. They only settled into the hard places of his being, waiting. Rhaegal's cry tore the air again, deeper, impatient. The rain had begun to cease. Great curtains ripped away to reveal ragged moonlight. The dragon's eyes glowed gold-green in the dark. "When the time comes," Tyrion ventured, hesitating, "will you stop her?" Jon turned at that. The hall's doorway threw a dim yellow halo around the dwarf, spattering his soaked mantle with light. Tyrion's mismatched eyes were wide but not pleading, merely resigned, as though he already saw the road's end and could not bring himself to name it. "I am not a king," Jon answered, though the lie rang hollow even to his own ears. Kings are made, not born, Tyrion said softly. And some are forged in desperate hours. Joan's hand fell to the hilt of Longclaw, though he did not draw the blade. She trusts me still, he said. The admission tasted like blood. If I turn on her now? Tyrion's laugh was a brittle thing. If, my friend, you stand upon a blade's edge, your silence will cost more lives than your sword. Claim the throne if that is what must be, but claim it quickly, before Queen Daenerys claims everything else. Then, Jon stared at him, and in that instant, a single perfect memory surfaced unbidden. The Godwood at Winterfell, sunlight flickering through red leaves, Arya's laughter echoing through the trunks. He could almost smell the pine and iron water. The world had been smaller then, bounded by the promise of snow and the unspoken certainty that honor solved all riddles. That certainty was gone, yet the memory breathed warmth into his chest. A small ember against the night, Rhaegal's shadow swept across them like a living banner. Tyrion lowered his hood and let the rain slick his pale hair to his cheeks. She will not yield, he said. She cannot. The dragon inside her is awake, and it will not sleep again. Joan's eyes lifted to the sky. Rhaegal circled once more, then veered toward the old causeway, where dark barracks huddled like squat toads in the mud. The great beast folded his wings and alighted upon the basalt plateau, outside the castle walls, shaking the ground with his landing. Jon felt the tremor travel up through the stone and into his bones. Destiny, whispered a voice too cold to be ghosts. Or doom. The two wore the same face at times. He rested his palm on Tyrion's shoulder, a gesture neither of them could fully parse. Thank you, he murmured. Then he strode for the stairs while thunder rumbled again across the sky. Inside, the halls of Dragonstone wound like a serpent's gut. Torchlight flickered upon carved black stone. Every corner seemed haunted by the faces of long-dead Targaryens, their sharp Valyrian features caught mid-snarl or smirk. Jon passed silent, unsullied guards who did not meet his gaze. He caught the faint scent of rose and smoke, Missandei's perfume, lingering still even after her voice had been cut from the world. Ghosts everywhere. They followed him like regrets. He found the War Council chamber empty, but for Grey Worm, who knelt at a long table, inspecting a map marked with neat lines of red wax. The commander's shaven head gleamed under the sconces. His face, as always, was unreadable, carved from obsidian resolve. Yet when he lifted his eyes to Jon, hatred smoldered there, banked but alive. Lord Snow. The words were flat. No welcome, no animosity. Until one listened beneath, where the embers crackled. The Queen commands all captains to prepare their men for embarkation at dawn. Have your Northmen cut their banners and ready. My men are not hers to command, Jon replied. Grey Worm rose, the clatter of his armor loud in the hush. All men in Westeros will be hers, or they will be broken. Jon felt the air tighten between them. And would that be freedom? Or another tyrant with a different flag? Grey Worm's jaw moved once, a tick of muscle near the mouth. The only fracture in his icy calm. The Queen is not a tyrant. She is savior. She freed me from chains. She freed thousands. The dead do not care who freed them, Jon said, surprised at his own sharpness. And they do not praise the hands that burned them. Grey Worm's hand slid to the hilt of his short spear, more reflex than threat. Jon did not flinch, though Longclaw's wolf-head pommel seemed to pulse beneath his fingers like a heartbeat. If you question her justice, the Unsullied whispered, speak it to her face. Not to me. Jon inclined his head, not in deference but dismissal. He stepped past the man, boots echoing across the chamber. He could feel Grey Worm's stare scorch his back. The truth would soon reveal itself, and it would be carved in blood if necessary. The thought sat in his gut like a frozen stone. The Queen's apartments lay in the oldest wing of the castle, where the walls sweated salt and every hallway echoed with the sea. As Jon approached, he heard voices, Daenerys first, low but fervent, then Varys, thin as papyrus. Jon paused in an alcove just beyond sight of the iron-banded doors. The spider's tone was conciliatory, almost pleading. Great victory, your grace. Yet mercy earned you more than fear ever could. The lords remember it, and they will rally if you but extend a hand. Mercy? Daenerys' reply cut like glass scraped over stone. Did mercy bring my brother back? Did it spare Missandei? Did it bend the knee of Cersei Lannister? Varys tried again. The small folk crave peace. They will sing of you if you show them gentleness. They will sing of me regardless. She snapped. I am fire made flesh, Lord Varys. Songs are written in flame and rebirth. Jon's chest tightened. For all his love, and he had loved her once, if memory could still be called love. He scarcely recognized the voice beyond the door. It rang with a fervor that was almost ecstasy, as though her very blood had transformed under the weight of prophecy. What of Jon Snow? Varys asked. The name sounded brittle on his tongue. His claim? The North's bastard, she said, a soft, poisonous laugh. He bent the knee. He forgot it once before the undead, but he will remember now. Silence. Then, if he does not, Rhaegal still flies at his side. But dragons know their true mother. Jon's pulse hammered. He waited for Varys' answer, but none came. The chamber doors creaked, footsteps receded. The spider was dismissed. Jon stepped back as Varys emerged, gray cloak drawn tight, the hood casting his plump face in gloom. Their eyes met. No words passed. Varys' look was enough. A flicker of sorrow, of iron, of resolve. And then he glided away down the corridor like a shadow seeking deeper dark. Jon stood alone before the door, listening to his heartbeat thrum against his ribs. He raised a hand to knock, hesitated, then let it fall. The path was set. Tyrion's words beat inside his skull. Before she claims everything else. He moved instead toward the stair that led up, not down, to the rookery, where ravens huddled against the storm and the cold moon carved silver paths across every feather. Maester Walken bent over a desk, sealing a letter with trembling fingers. The maester startled when Jon entered, knocking over a vial of ink that spread like black blood across the parchment. Forgive me, Lord. Your grace. He bowed, voice fluttering like a captive bird. The Queen has ordered dispatches to the Marcher Lords. Jon's voice was gentle as falling snow. You will send a different message. Walken's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Jon. The maester's ink-stained hand trembled. It is treason to countermand. If the city burns, what is treason worth? Jon asked, soft but flinty. Walken swallowed. What words then? Tell Sansa Stark that Jon Snow summons the banners of the North and the Riverlands. Tell her that Winterfell must march south. And tell her, he paused, saw Arya's fierce, hopeful grin, heard Bran's hush, swirling as leaves. Tell her the dragon fights for us now. Walken dipped his quill, and the sign, the seal. Jon's breath fogged in the cold. The only sigil he had ever borne was the direwolf of House Stark, though the world claimed he was Aegon Targaryen. A king's seal. An emperor's. Yet none of those fit the shape of his heart. He thought of Ghost again, of red leaves and snow, and of Rhaegal beating against the storm, scales the color of emerald pine needles in summer sun. The direwolf, he said at last, and a single green wing behind. Walken blinked, but he pressed the wolf's signet into the wax, and beneath it he drew a quick, deft line of emerald ink that curved like the arc of a dragon's flight. Jon watched the ink dry, and thought it strangely beautiful. A promise given shape, fragile yet alive. Hours bled away like water through cupped hands. Dawn gragged the clouds, and the first torches flared along the battlements. The Dothraki were already mounting, their harebells tinkling as they wheeled horses in tight circles. The Unsullied stood in silent cohorts. Spears bright and unwavering. Down in the bay, Euron's stolen fleet stirred, oars dipping with hollow rhythm. Smoke curled from cooking fires, rising to meet the low sky. Jon donned black leather hardened by war, buckled a breastplate carved with the direwolf rampant. Over it he threw a cloak of dark forest green, edged in white fur. The clasp was tarnished silver. Lyanna's pearl wolf head, once Sansa's, now loaned to him by wordless understanding. He strapped Longclaw at his hip and strode from the armory. At the plateau, Rhaegal waited, wings half spread, claws scoring white grooves into the stone. The dragon's breath steamed in great plumes. Jon laid a gloved hand upon the warm scale of the creature's chest, and felt the thunderous beat within. Rhaegal's eyes fixed upon him, pools of molten gold backlit by green flame. The dragon huffed, then dipped his massive head in a motion that felt dangerously close to reverence. The Dothraki fell silent. Even Grey Worm paused at the head of his ranks, dark gaze drawn upward. Jon swung onto the beast's back with a familiarity that still surprised him. Though each time he did so, terror and elation tangled in his throat like threads. He settled between the ridges, leather gloves closing around the thick neck spines. "Fly," he whispered, though it was as much for himself as for Rhaegal. And the word vanished against the wind of wings as the dragon leapt skyward. They surged into cloud. Rain stung his cheeks, tasted of salt and iron. Below, the Black Island dwindled, the army's mere ants scurrying at the Queen's command. Jon guided Rhaegal not eastward toward King's Landing, but north and west, hugging the coast, skimming whitecaps. The dragon knew without being told. Felt the tension in his rider's grip, perhaps, or sensed some deeper tug between hearts newly bound. They cut through the spindrift air swift as a thunderbolt. The green fields of the Reach unfurled beneath them, like a patchwork cloak. Orchards soaked from spring storms, rivers swollen and silver. Villages dotted the land, plumes of hearth smoke rising from thatch roofs. Jon's eyes traced every hamlet, every tiny flicker of life. He could almost place names to some. Bitterbridge, Greenapple Vale, the ruins of Ashford Castle. So many souls. Too many graves yet to dig. They landed by a ruined sept on a lonely hill at dusk. Rhaegal curled around the shattered marble pillars, steam pluming from his nostrils as he settled like a great green cat. Jon dismounted, legs shaking from hours in the saddle. He knelt in the long grass. A ring of songbirds had gone silent at the dragon's arrival, but a single starling now dared to chirp from a cracked stone saint's outstretched hand. Jon listened a while, to bird call and the sigh of wind through weeds, until the thudding in his chest eased. He had not slept since leaving Dragonstone, but exhaustion felt indulgent now. Instead, he drew parchment from his breast pocket. The letter Sansa would already have in hand, and beneath it another blank leaf. In firelight from a small camp flame he scrawled a line to Arya. "Sister, meet me on the Roserad, where the old arch of Garth Greenhand still stands. Bring the hound if you trust him." Then beneath, a postscript inked hastily. "If I fail, guard Bran." He did not sign it. A wolf, drawn in profile. Its eye a single iris of green, was enough. He tied the note to a raven's leg and let it go. The bird's wings flashed ivory in the last red light. Jon watched until it became a speck, and the speck disappeared. Only then did he let himself think of Daenerys, of Dragonstone behind them, of Drogon rising above black cliffs, searching, searching. His resolve was a blade, sharpened beyond safe measure, but even the keenest steel must not tremble. He pressed his palms to the damp grass and closed his eyes. The earth was cold against his skin, yet alive, thrumming with the sap of unseen roots. Somewhere far to the north, the snows of the wall were melting, and somewhere deeper still, the magic that once raised dead men into monsters was retreating into the oldest shadows. Yet the world did not heal itself in a day. It required shepherds, and sometimes it required fire. He slept a little. Rhaegal kept vigil, eyes glowing like watchfires in the dark. Jon dreamed of Winterfell's broken towers knit together in green ice, of ghosts stretching in tall grass beneath summer sun. He dreamt of Lyanna whispering, "Your father loved me," in the gloom of the Tower of Joy, and woke with tears he did not remember shedding. Storm clouds had rolled in once more, turning the sky the color of bruised steel. Dawn lay perhaps an hour away. He rose, bones aching, and tightened the buckles of his armor. Rhaegal shuffled his wings, eager. The Queen would have reached Blackwater Bay by now. Her armies encamped along the King's Road. Jon pictured Tyrion among them, eyes shadowed, fingers drumming along a wineskin he dared not drink. And Varys. slipping between tents like mist. And Grey Worm, expressionless, spear glinting with the promise of simple answers. Simple, lethal answers. Jon mounted again. Lightning forked across the clouds, and in the flash, distant fields glimmered. He guided Rhaegal southeast toward the rolling hills, where the Roserad carved its pale ribbon. In time he spied a thin swirl of dust, a column of horsemen moving north. His heart kicked when he saw the direwolf banner snapping at the fore. White on gray, the Starks come in force. They landed ahead of the host, and the Northerners reined back in alarm as the dragon's shadow fell over them. But when Jon stepped forward, dirt streaked, cloak plastered to his shoulders, a cheer rose that startled him with its raw, unfiltered joy. Women and men leapt from their saddles, kneeled, pressed hands to hearts. Gendry Baratheon rode at Sansa's right, blacksmith arms burly in half-fitted armor. Arya sat a smoky gray mare just behind, hood half down, face lit with a fierce grin. Even Podrick Payne rode there, beside Brienne, in gleaming blue steel. Sansa dismounted and strode toward him, red hair clinging damply to her cheeks. She looked every inch her mother, no more. Catelyn had never wielded such calm steel. Jon realized he was trembling only when her gloved hand closed around his. She studied his face, reading years and breaths, and finally nodded, as though confirming something she had always known. "I received your message," she said. "We ride at your word." The final pieces were gathering. Jon felt the weight of them settle into alignment, a shifting of plates beneath the world, heralding either birth or ruin. Around him, the Northerners gazed upon Rhaegal with awe that bordered on worship. Yet their eyes found their lord sooner, and in them, Jon saw hunger for something larger than vengeance. He saw hope. Rhaegal lowered his head, snuffling curiously at the gathered banners, and the men laughed, nervous yet exhilarated. Jon laid a hand to the dragon's snout and turned back to Sansa Daya. Dawn's first light edged the clouds behind her in palest gold, as though the sun itself were straining to peer over the horizon and witness what came next. "We make for the Antlers," he said. "We will cut Daenerys off before the Kingswood. If she reaches the Red Keep with Drogon at her back, there will be no city left to save." Sansa's gaze flicked to the great beast looming above them, then to the legions of Stark spears mustering along the road. Her chin lifted. "Then we will not let her reach it." An answer simple as that, yet it rang like a bell in Jon's skull. The bell Tyrion feared she would never hear. His mouth was dry. He looked at Arya, whose hand had strayed to the leather-wrapped hilt of needle. She met his stare, and in her gray gaze he saw neither doubt nor innocence, only readiness spun of cold nights and unnamed roads. The armies formed rank behind them. Rhaegal roared once, the sound rolling across the fields like a promise. Horses shied, banners whipped, but no one wavered. The column surged forward, a river of steel and wool and fervent hearts flooding southward. Jon vaulted onto Rhaegal's back, cloak snapping. The wind rushed to meet them as the dragon rose, and below, Sansa's voice rang out in command, clear as the call of a horn. "Winterfell! To the king! To the dragon wolf!" And Jon's throat clenched. He had not chosen the name, but it rode the air like wildfire, unstoppable, bright. Rhaegal banked, shadow sweeping over the ranks, and Jon guided him south, toward thunderclouds lit from within by furtive flame. The armies streamed beneath like veins pumping life. Somewhere ahead, Daenerys Targaryen advanced with fire in her heart and ruins in her wake. The first droplets of rain struck Jon's cheeks. He tasted salt again. This time, it was his own tears, mingled with the sea-scented wind, as the dragon wolf led his people into the storm. "Wa, K, Pa." Wind sighed through the tall hedgerows that flanked the Roserad, carrying the vegetal scent of broken stems and the faint tang of damp loam. Sunrise burned behind layered storm clouds, a muted orange glow that glazed every helm and spear tip with something like dying ember light. The northern host advanced beneath it, thousands strong yet hushed, leather and mail creaking in rhythm with hoofbeats and the subdued clatter of wagon wheels. Jon rode at the fore beside Sansa. Rhaegal glided overhead, a silent shadow that rippled across green fields and startled flocks of nesting starlings into panicked spirals. Where the dragon's wings cut the cloud banks, they left brief trenches of blue sky that healed almost at once. Sansa kept her mount, an iron-gray courser from Wintertown, at a patient walk. She wore a brigandine of quilted mail beneath a cloak of russet wool, and though riders bowed as she passed, her half-lidded eyes missed little. The rattle in a wagon axle, the fatigue in a pikeman's uneven stride, the way raw recruits tried to match veteran cadence. Once she leaned close to Jon and murmured that their rear ranks needed fresh shoes by nightfall, or they would bleed before the first clash. He nodded, making a mental mark, grateful for the logistical eye he had never possessed. Davos Seaworth rode a length behind them, pulling his hood low each time drizzle spattered down. He had counted barrels of pickled cod and sacks of dried oats at dawn, then reported they must secure forage, or start having rations within 3 days. Davos' voice had sounded calm, but his weathered face told a sterner tale. Supply would win or lose the quiet war that already coiled around them. Around midday, the column crested a low hill, crowned by an abandoned windmill. From that perch, the reach unfolded soft and verdant. Yet scars marred the quilt. Here a ring of blackened wheat where fire had run, there a scorched farmhouse, whose stone chimney jutted like a broken finger toward heaven. Jon reined in. Rhaegal banked once, descending to hover above the shattered ruin. The dragon's slow wing beats stirred ash into spirals that licked at the rubble and died. Jon's yaw nodded. Only the Queen's vanguard could have burned so deeply this far west of the Mander, and Daenerys traveled east of them, not north. Someone else then, perhaps raiders emboldened by chaos, or Talonlancers from Old Oak, eager to curry favor by terror. Regardless, the sight fed the gnawing certainty that time bled away with each furlong. That evening they halted near Bitterbridge, where the Roseruad kissed the Mander's bottle-green curve. The waters ran fast from recent storms, swollen enough that ferryboats at the landing strained against ropes, keels churning mud. Engineers erected a floating causeway of barges, lashed bow to stern. Fires sprouted along the bank as camp took shape. Braziers hammered from old cauldrons. Cookpots bubbling squirrel stew laced with carrots filched from fallow fields. Sentries paced the causeway, in pairs, cloaks snapping, while further off blacksmiths struck sparks from makeshift anvils to mend cracked breastplates. Jon shed cuirass and gloves beneath a sagging canvas awning. Steam curled from his linen undertunic where sweat met evening chill. Ghostly pale midges spun in the lamplight, obliterated when they drifted too near the brazier's blue core. He ran a whetstone down Longclaw's edge, not from need. The Valyrian blade drank sharpness like a leech drinks blood, but for the steadiness motion lent his mind. Each rasp cleared cluttered thought. Each spark was a reason to keep breathing. Tyrion arrived wrapped in a stained wool mantle, hair plastered by mist. He settled on an upended ale cask opposite Jon, and held chilled hands above the brazier. "Our scouts count fires on the south bank," he said without greeting. "Too few for the Queen's army, too many for travelers. I sent Brienne with Gendry and 40 mounted bowmen to have a look." Jon dragged the stone twice more along Longclaw before answering. "If it is the Golden Company, we'll know by dawn." Tyrion produced a wineskin from within his mantle, sniffed it, then offered it across. Jon shook his head. The dwarf's mismatched irises glittered orange in torchlight as he drank. "I wish," Tyrion muttered, "that my faith were as sharp as that blade. But mine dulls upon every stone." A long sigh. "The Queen believes you still in her service. The longer you remain alive, the likelier she suspects treachery." He tilted the skin, but a final dribble clung stubbornly to the mouth. "If she strikes first, then we end it before she strikes," Jon said. The words fell leaden. How many ravens return tonight? 5. Lord Edmure promises 3,000 bowmen from River Run, but needs a 10-day to rally. House Blackwood has sworn. House Bracken, predictably, waits to see who bleeds first. Tyrion tossed the empty skin against a pile of spare javelins where it sagged like a slain animal. "Your sister rode long to gather this host, yet even 10,000 spears melt before dragonfire. Jon lifted eyes to the gloom beyond the awning where Rhaegal's immense silhouette coiled beside the riverbank, wings mantled. Argent reflections of campfires danced across emerald scales. We are not without fire of our own. Tyrion followed his gaze. One dragon against the queen's drogon. He rubbed his scarred nose. You may be equal in flame, but she is not equal in rage. Jon slid Longclaw into its scabbard. Then we must ensure her rage has no field on which to bloom. He left Tyrion and walked the camp's perimeter. Sentries saluted, some shyly asking whether the stories of him riding through blizzards on a dragon were true. He answered with as many smiles as he could summon, though each felt foreign on his face. Past midnight, he ducked inside Sansa's pavilion, large as any lord's hall. Oak-framed rugs thrown across trampled grass. She knelt beside a low writing table, quill scratching parchment. Arya lounged on a three-legged stool sharpening needle, eyes following the quill's darting dance. The sisters looked up in unison when Jon entered, a silent accord he had never seen in Winterfell's halls. Salad Horsan's captains patrol the Blackwater, Sansa said without preamble. If we seize the antlers, his ships cut Daenerys a supply at the mouth. She tapped a tiny map stitched with colored threads. Blue cords for waterways, red for roads, white for marching columns. A bold plan, Arya quipped. Lips quirked. If Salator's gold outweighs her dragons. Jon crouched opposite Sansa. Candle flames picked copper strands from her hair. We hold the crossing at the antlers, threaten siege from the north, and trap her between us and King's Landing's walls. Sansa's fingers tightened around the quill. Provided the city itself resists. Lord Lannister said Cersei stocked 4 moons of grain inside the Red Keep. Starving folk may soon decide any dragon is better than hunger. A hush descended, punctured only by Arya's slow rasp of stone against steel. Jon studied the sisters, the poise Sansa wore like armor, the restless calm that cloaked Arya like shadow. Something flared in his chest, pride mingled with dread, that they had crossed half a realm to answer his call. If the queen comes, he said, it will be with Drogon at her vanguard. I'll take Rhaegal above him, draw his fire. While he climbs, our archers must target the queen. Neither flinched at his bald admission that Daenerys might die by northern arrow. Sansa dipped her quill again. Brienne drills the bowcore nightly. We melt castle bells for arrowheads. Bronze splinters shatter inside flesh. Arya sheathed the needle with a soft click. And if arrows miss, a knife may find a softer root. Jon met her gray gaze, lit with an assassin's certainty, and felt a chill that was not entirely fear. The Unsullied guard her day and night. Arya shrugged. They breathe, do they not? And where breath goes, steel may follow. Sansa pressed wax to her parchment, and stamped the direwolf seal hard enough that the canine eyes dented wax. We have until dawn to cross. Get some rest, brother. But sleep eluded him. He left the tent and climbed a grassy knoll beyond the wagons. Stars glimmered like hoarfrost between racing clouds. Far off, torches winked on the opposite bank. Gendry's party returning. Jon descended to meet them as they dismounted, bridles wet with river spray. Brienne's armor dripped as she strode up, visor lifted. Band of free riders, my lord. They claim no allegiance to the queen, but their colors were stripped Lannister crimson. They fled when they spied Rhaegal. She paused, jaw flexing. We found bodies in their wake. Small folk, burned. Jon thanked her. The chill inside his lungs deepened. Before dawn's first smear of pallid light, he woke Rhaegal with a sharp whistle. The dragon rose, shaking dew from his wings. They gained the sky as thin fog curled along the river. Beneath, barges ferried the first ranks across. Jon banked south to scout the royal army's path. From 500 feet, he saw fresh columns of smoke in the crowns of distant oaks. Villages torched so quickly, flames still licked damp rafters. Blackened footprints in muddy lanes marked unsullied, sandaled march. He smelled horse fear on wind and heard the buzz of flies where charred carcasses blistered in fields. Near midday, upon a ridge west of Hayford, he glimpsed Drogon, a black silhouette wheeling above a granary ablaze. Wings like rent night, firelight riddled scaly hide. Each downstroke flung embers into rye. Even from leagues away, the heat gust washed over Joan's cheeks. Rhaegal bristled, throat vibrating as if drumming a challenge. Jon clenched spines, urged restraint, and banked away. Two dragons meeting above smoking farmlands would achieve nothing but further ruin. He returned to the northern host hours later. The green cloak that had once felt alien now hung heavy with ash. When he touched down, Tyrion stood waiting near the makeshift list. "She is half a day ahead," Jon reported. "Burning, but sparing grain stores. Intentional. She means to feed a conquered city." Tyrion sighed. A benevolent conqueror, if one ignores the path of cinders behind her. By sunset, they reached the antlers, rolling woodland split by a stone bridge arcing across a steep, narrow gorge, where the Wendwater crashed white against jagged granite. Ancient weirwoods studded misty hollows, bark scabbed blood red. Jon ordered pikemen to barricade the southern mouth of the bridge, while bowriers climbed the slopes to post watchfires among lime trees, whose spring growth fluttered delicate as moth wings. Rhaegal perched atop the central arch for hours, elf light shimmering green across the river's tumbling froth. Children of camp followers crept near to toss the dragon-skinned rabbits, squealing delight when his long pink tongue flicked them whole. The beast accepted the offerings with surprising gentleness before settling into statuesque stillness, eyes slit vertical and unblinking. Night deepened. Fires guttered low. Only watchtowers shone. Jon took counsel in a hollow beneath a warped elm, lantern hung from a rusty hook. Sansa, Tyrion, Davos, Brienne, and the Lord of House Manderley, still panting from the march, gathered around a crude chalk outline scrawled on slate. Jon laid out his plan. Grey Worm's vanguard must engage Stark spears mid-bridge, denying room for unsullied phalanx to widen. Meanwhile, a detachment of Riverlord archers hidden upriver would loose a hail from the cliff mouths, once the unsullied were boxed between gorge walls. With luck, confusion and falling bodies would halt their push long enough for Arya's infiltration team, faceless spies and Brotherhood remnants, to slip across downstream and strike at Daenerys' command tent. The plan relied upon synchronized chaos. Failure lay in any timing lost. Sansa's brow creased, but she voiced support. Davos stroked beard stubble, murmuring that wind and river's roar might swallow signal horns. Tyrion volunteered glimmer pots, small clay bombs filled with mirror sand, that exploded with light rather than flame. "At my command," he said. "We blind the unsullied ranks for 3 long heartbeats. Enough for archers to pick officers without burning our own." Brienne's steel-blue eyes flicked to Jon. "If you fall, the men falter." "Then I do not fall," Jon answered. Later, alone, he paced the riverbank beneath trembling willow branches. Dark water slid around his boots. Pale pebbles gleamed below the shallows like drowned bones. He felt rather than heard footsteps behind him. Arya appeared, face half-masked by breeze-tossed hair. She held something, a thin strip of direwolf leather wrapped about a carved wood token, shaped like a snarling wolf. "I made it on the ride south," she said, voice softer than the water. "Tal Nedley taught me to carve when we camped in the Riverlands." She pressed it into Jon's palm. "Watch over you if the Seven won't." He turned the amulet in moonlight, saw the tiny scratch of initials on the underside. JS, shallow but indelible. His throat thickened. "Thank you." Arya's smile was rueful. "You always did need watching." She sobered, shifting weight. "Tomorrow," she faltered, unusual for her. "I know you love her in some corner still. If the chance comes, will you hesitate?" Jon looked downriver where Rhaegal's silhouette speared the sky, wings folded like towers. "I must not," he said, though doubt coiled quick and vicious inside his gut. Hesitation kills more surely than steel. He felt Arya's fingers brush his wrist, quick, almost shy. And then she was gone, melting into willow shade. Jon clutched the wolf, heart hammering. Dawn bled across clouds the color of bruises. Horns brayed triple-note alarms. Unsullied banners had appeared along the southern ridges. Shields fused into a gleaming wall. Their bronze impassive masks caught sunrise in molten crescents. Dothraki screamed up the rear, Arrax scything the air. Far above, Drogon painted a descending loop through ragged fog. Black wings blotting sun. Jon vaulted onto Rhaegal. Leather straps wrapped the dragon's neck, forming crude harness loops he barely trusted. Yet he rocked forward, knuckles white tight, as the beast surged skyward. Wind whipped cloak flat against spine. From 100 fathoms he saw the entire theater. Narrow bridge clogged with stark iron, northerners bristling in shallow ranks, unsullied spears braced, silent. Grey Worm rode near the foremost ashlar, bleak eyes scanning. Dothraki riders feinted along the western bank, hooves kicking spray as they probed for a ford. Jon shouted command in High Valyrian. Rhaegal answered with abrupt dive that slapped waves into mist and forced the Khalasar scattering. Horses screamed, wheeling. The dragon skimmed water, then lofted, banking to screech defiance at Drogon's looming shape. The black dragon hissed, a sizzling roar like lava meeting sea. Their circling formed an aerial spiral above the bridge, two storms hunting one-eyed Daiwai. From below rose the clash of spear on shield, the crack of crossbow cords, the hiss of arrows finding flesh. Tyrion's glimmer pots burst, white searing pulses that flared brighter than lightning. Unsullied ranks recoiled, shields lifting instinctively to eye slits. Archers on the cliff edge answered. A whistle, then a cloud of death humming downward. The first volley shattered bronze masks. Splintered skeletal noses hissed through throats. Grey Worm pushed forward, rallying, but at mid-span, exactly where Jon had hoped, the stone arches narrowed, denying width for flanking. Stark axes hammered into lock shields, pikes thrust low to hook ankles. Bodies tumbled into foaming water that carried them spinning into rocks beneath. Yet the Unsullied did not break. Their formation flexed, adapted, any gap instantly filled by another soldier. Above, Drogon sheared through cloud, then dropped in a hammering stoop. Jon saw furnace light bloom in his throat. He tugged Rhaegal's reins, felt the jolt as green wings snapped shut for a plunge that interposed emerald scales between Blackfire and bridge. Two jets of flame met, a white-hot plume and a searing green-gold torrent. They collided mid-air with a shriek like tearing metal. Fire washed around Jon's ears, muffled all sound. The impact hurled Rhaegal backward, his membranes seared, but he fought, claws tearing vapor for purchase. Jon leaned flat, coughing smoke, blinking tears from ash-gritted lashes. Drogon climbed, banking southwest over the Wendwater Gorge, tail lashing like a whip of shadow. Rhaegal growled deep. Jon steadied him, forced a slower ascent. He needed to draw Drogon north, away from the river battles. A memory flickered. Lyanna's pearl clasp, the hush of Godswood. Not yet finished. He jabbed spurs into scale. Rhaegal shrieked and surged after the black dragon, talons extended. Far below, Arya's infiltration team, clad in dungrace that matched rock, scrambled beneath the southern lip of the gorge. Jon caught a glimpse, tiny ants scaling lattice roots toward a thicket where a crimson dragon banner snapped. His pulse throbbed. If Arya reached the command tent, perhaps the queen could be captured, not slain. Drogon banked sharply inland, smoke pluming from nostrils. Fields rippled beneath as the two dragons trailed fiery contrails across bruised sky. Rhaegal's deeper chest beat like hammer blows against Jon's thighs. Each wing stroke sucked wind into lung sacs that flared along ribs. They closed distance. Sparks skittered from Drogon's tail where green talons scratched scale. Drogon twisted, gaping jaws to bite. Rhaegal yanked high, claws raking along black flank, shearing a rope of molten ichor that hissed into the wind as droplets. They tumbled, locked, spinning through cloud that wreathed them in thunder. Jon's ears popped, blood roared. He glimpsed Drogon's rider then. Silver hair whipping, gauntleted hands gripping Spike's saddle. Daenerys' face streaked soot, teeth bared in snarl, half triumphant, half feral. Their gazes met for a fraction, both framed by whirling embers. The storm of memory crashed across Jon. Kisses by torchlight, promises whispered in ancient tongues, betrayal seated in the warmth of shared breath. Her violet eyes widened. Recognition, shock, a wound akin to heartbreak, just before Drogon barrel rolled away. Jon shouted a plea he could not name. The wind stole it. Rhaegal steadied, sides heaving. Below them, miles of dark forest heaved like green oceans. Ahead lay the Kingswood's northern horns. Beyond, the hazy walls of King's Landing, still distant but catching sunrise on crenellations. Drogon climbed, wings laboring harder now, purple smoke venting from slashed hide. Yet he drew once more the blazing breath. Gullet ballooning with wildfire glow. Jon realized the strike would arc not at Rhaegal, but at the forest below, a sweeping scythe to immolate any host in march. His heart clutched. He pressed heel against Rhaegal's flank, turning him into a steep dive that placed emerald bulk between Drogon's muzzle and the tree line. The world inverted, sky beneath, earth above, and then fire erupted. A concussive blast hammered scales. Sudden white radiance seared vision to blindness. Jon felt the dragon lurch, a rolling quake as heat raced along bones. Pain sang through his legs, his spine, yet still he clung. When sight returned, the forest below smoked but had not ignited fully. Rhaegal's intercept shielded a quarter-league swath. Drogon wheeled away, obviously winded. Daenerys clung, expression a mask of rage. Jon lifted his voice in the only plea he had left. "Stop. You will destroy them all." But the words were devoured by Gale. He reached within, past fear, past grief, to that razor of decision Tyrion had named. He tugged leather reins, forcing Rhaegal parallel to Drogon's path, matching pace wing for wing. At that speed, they floated almost weightless in the night's upper hush. Jon released the reins, raised his gloved hands, palms open. A gesture older than kingdoms. No weapon, no threat. Daenerys' eyes flicked to his empty grip, then back to his face in disbelief. Between them stretched 20 yards of uncertainty and burning sky. A shard of something, old affection perhaps, or the memory of a mist-wreathed kiss atop a ruined tower, quivered in the space, fragile as the translucent wing of a moth. Her jaw trembled. Drogon's incandescent throat dimmed by degrees. Flame withheld, but not forgotten. Jon drew breath. In that fragile hush, he pictured the bells Tyrion had begged her to heed. The ones she had never truly heard. And he imagined them now, tolling from the spires of the Sept of Baelor, ringing benediction over streets unburnt. He gazed at Daenerys across the gulf of wind and flame, and tried to weight every heartbeat with those silent bells. Below, faint horns sounded, the stag of storms end by the tenor. Another host approaching? The realm convulsed around them, so many coins tossed in the air. But above none of it mattered more than the woman before him, balanced on the cusp of annihilation. Jon mouthed a single word. "Please." Something shifted in her fierce eyes, a hairline crack. Then a cloth bundle, small, feathered, whistled between them. A quarrel tipped with bronze. Jon saw it an instant before the thud. It struck Drogon high on the neck ridge and skittered off scale, harmless but startling. More missiles streaked from forest shadows, a dozen hissing past Jon's ears. Drogon roared, pain forgotten. Rage reignited. Green flame danced again in his maw. "Wait!" Jon cried, but wind carried sound into oblivion. Daenerys leaned low. Spoke a word Jon could not hear. Drogon veered, banking hard toward the archers below. Perhaps Northerners, perhaps Stormlanders. Jon hauled Rhaegal after, heart hammering dread. But gray shapes darted from trees, Arya's team, launching mirror bombs skyward. They burst blinding white around Drogon's head. The black dragon shrieked, momentum faltering. Rhaegal slammed shoulder into him, talons latching tight, and both titans plummeted, locked in ruinous grapple. Jon clung to spines as wind howled. Trees rushed up, huge, inevitable. At the last instant, Rhaegal thrust wings wide, arresting fall enough to wrench Drogon's sinew-scarred left wing. A wet crack rolled like thunder. Drogon howled agony. Daenerys nearly unseated. Jon found himself flung into empty space, world tipping, sky and earth blurred. He struck a pine canopy, branches shattering around Mael, and crashed through to forest floor where everything went dim. When he opened eyes, night had deepened, and smoke hung heavy. Flames licked tree trunks in patches, casting leering shadows. Pain radiated from shoulder and hip, but limbs obeyed. He rolled onto knees, spitting needles and blood. Rhaegal's roar bellowed somewhere east. Drogon's return answered, strained, wing beat faltering. Shouts, human, ragged, echoed between trunks. Unsullied, shields up and fall back, fall back. The battlefield had fractured into a dozen pockets of chaos. Jon staggered through fern and thorn toward a clearing veiled in smoke. He emerged to find Grey Worm, helm lost, spear haft, splintered yet gripped like a scepter. The commander faced Davos and a half-ring of northerners. 30 feet beyond lay the Queen's crimson pavilion, half crushed by a toppled oak, its flame-stenciled canvas torn like shedding skin. No sign of Daenerys. Grey Worm's voice rang stark with fury. "No farther? Lay down arms." Davos panted, sword sagging. "Only stand aside, lad. No need for more death tonight." Jon limped forward, raising Longclaw though tip wavered. Grey Worm's eyes, black as river stones, fixed upon him, recognition merging with hate. "Traitor," he breathed. "You dared raise blade against her." "No," Jon rasped. "I shielded her." "Where is she?" "Namsabs." A peal of tree bark. Then Arya emerged to Jon's right. Face streaked soot. Dagger reversed in fist. She shook her head once. "No queen here." Grey Worm snarled and rushed. Time slowed. Jon lifted Longclaw in two hands, muscles screaming. The Unsullied drove a jagged spear fragment toward his throat. But Arya vaulted, hitting Grey Worm at the knee, force enough to throw strike off line. Jon twisted, flat of his blade cracking against the commander's temple. Grey Worm crashed, helmetless skull thudding loam. He lay stunned. Jon steadied breath. "Bind him," he ordered, voice shredded. Brienne strode from smoke with 2 Stormlanders and lengths of chain. As they knelt, distant horns brayed anew, different timbre, royal and sad all at once. Tyrion stumbled into clearing. Hair caught with ash, cheeks streaked tears. "King's Landing," he gasped. "Smoke over the city." "She's burning it, gods forgive us." Jon's knees buckled, only Longclaw held him upright. He looked skyward. Through drifting cinders he saw 2 figures. Drogon limping westward, wings labored, and on his neck, Daenerys clinging. She flew toward the city she had vowed to break, pain twisting flight into a diagonal spiral, yet unstoppable. Rhaegal clawed sky to follow, but fatigue and wounds dragged him earth-long. He rose only a few hundred feet before faltering, gliding to crash in a meadow north of the Wendwater. His roar was piteous, tinged with apology. Around Jon the world crackled, trees ablaze, wounded weeping, steel clanging remote. Tyrion's voice trembled. "All our haste, all these deaths, and still we are too late." Jon shook head. Not too late. He stumbled toward the meadow where Rhaegal lay, Sansa and Davos shadowing him. Each step felt miles, but purpose carried weight beyond bone. "We fly," he said. "She must be stopped before the bells fall silent forever." Sansa's eyes glimmered. "Stark bows will take Drogon from the sky if you draw him east." "And if that fails," Davos whispered. Jon set jaw, felt the wood token dig into his palm. Wolf teeth etched shallow but sure. Then the dragon wolf will end it himself. Behind them dawn's first pallor flared along the horizon, washing crimson through smoke columns that reached like accusing fingers toward helpless heavens. Aika. Ash drifted across the dawn like mournful snow. A million feather sparks born of burning roofs, and snapped timbers, swirling on fitful eddies even this far from the walls of King's Landing. The air smelled of charred pitch and rendered tallow. And beneath those harsh notes, a sweeter rot. Apricot stalls, grain bins, half-cured hides, All surrendered to the same hungry flame. Jon tasted it as he labored up the torn slope toward the meadow where Rhaegal lay. Every breath every breath. Scraping his throat raw. Sansa matched his stride, cloak hem dark with soot, while Davos ranged ahead to clear fallen branches. Behind, the intermittent clatter of mail and the grunt of stretcher-bearers told of a rear guard in weary motion. They crested the hill and found Rhaegal half-sprawled in a shallow vale, one wing twisted at an ugly angle, trailing sinew and shredded sail. The dragon's breath wheezed in hot bursts that stank of scorched meat. His emerald eyes followed Jon's approach with feverish lucidity, a low rumble echoing behind needle-toothed jaws. At his flank, Maester Walken crouched amid piles of stained linen, the maester's robe soaked nearly black where he had pressed bandages against a deep puncture between ribs. "He lives," Walken rasped before Jon could ask. Some shards lodged near the lung. Bone, perhaps scale. "I have no tools large enough to reach them." Jon knelt, ignoring the muddy dew that seeped into his breeches. He set a steadying palm to Rhaegal's neck, felt the furnace pulse of blood beneath battered hide, and spoke softly in Valyrian, nonsense syllables more lullaby than meaning. The great head lowered. Steam vented through nostrils and puffed across Jon's cheeks like sighs from an iron forge. He closed his eyes and pictured Winterfell's godswood under first snow. The old white trunk banded by red stigma eyes, its stillness an answer to ancient pain. He tried to carry that stillness into his voice. A promise, a quiet held between heartbeats. When he opened his eyes again, the dragon watched him with a gaze that seemed less clouded, though agony still rippled through the muscular hide each time a broken rib scraped inward. Jon turned to Walken. "Purging the fragments may kill him, but they'll fester if we leave them." "How deep?" 3 inches, maybe 4. I felt the first with forceps, but could not draw it free. The maester's hands shook with fatigue, and fresh blood painted the bandage corners already seeped through. "Heat the blade," Jon said, gaze resting on the blacksmith's portable brazier some yards away. Sparks fanned upward as an apprentice pumped the bellows. "We cut." Walken's lips blanched. "I have opiate draught enough to fell an ox, but for a dragon, pain will slow him, yet I believe he'll allow it." Jon faced Sansa. "Gather every spear shaft we can spare. Strong oak, unshattered. Have them lashed into splints." Sansa nodded once, words unnecessary, and strode back toward the trees. Davos seized a length of canvas to serve as sling and followed. While Walken prepared, Jon whispered to Rhaegal again, explaining as one might to a wounded direwolf. "Pain first, then breath unburdened, wings aloft again." The dragon's pupils contracted, a gleam of trust or perhaps shared desperation flickering behind golden glass. When the maester pressed a cup of amber liquid against the great forked tongue, Rhaegal swallowed, shuddered, and settled his massive head upon the grass. Jon laid both palms against the hot scales and waited. The iron blade hissed as it left the brazier, orange bright along its edge. Walken climbed a laddered stool to reach the wound. 2 Stark soldiers braced the dragon's shoulder, though their courage wavered at each spasm that rippled through the ridge of spines. Jon kept speaking, low and rhythmic, while the maester parted flesh gone sticky with half-coagulated gore. The stink was unbearable. One soldier retched and stumbled off. Another took his place without a word. Steel clicked against something hard. Walken grunted, set forceps, and drew. A jagged spike of char-black scale, Drogon's, lodged like a barbed arrowhead, emerged glistening. Blood followed, a thick sheet of red. Rhaegal convulsed. The stool lurched. Walken nearly pitched sideways before Jon steadied him. The maester cast the shard aside, worked again, deeper. This time he freed a smaller splinter, curved like a serpent's fang. Minutes stretched into eternities as 5 fragments joined the grass in a grisly necklace. Each removal drew new surge of crimson that Walken stanched with poultices, soaked in firemilk and ground nettle. At last Jon felt Rhaegal's breathing lengthen. not shallow gasps, but fuller drafts. The giant lid drooped over one eye. Exhaustion pulled the creature toward fitful sleep. "Enough," Jon whispered. Walken slumped against the dragon's shoulder, blood to elbows, eyes ringed violet with strain. Sansa returned with splints. Davos and 4 soldiers hauled rawhide and leather thongs. They fashioned a cradle that kept the torn wing half raised, bones aligned. When it was done, Rhaegal managed a test flex. Subtle, but promising. "He will not carry 2 across a city this day," Walken warned. "Perhaps 1, if the pain does not break him." Jon's answer was a grim nod. "1 would be enough. It must be." He turned to Sansa. "You command here. Rally what riverlords you can. Push south once dust rises from the city, either to lend aid or bury the dead." Her brows pinched. "Jon, Aegon, brother, whichever name you claim, do not deny that this fight may cost you everything." "It may," he said. "But if I stay, it will cost more." He drew her into a fierce embrace that smelled of ash and damp hair, and the stubborn soap someone had pressed upon her in Riverrun. He felt the tremor she tried to hide and pressed lips to her temple. "Guard them. Guard yourself. The North was meant to live." "So." She pulled back, wiped smoke grime from his cheek with a trembling thumb, and managed a wan smile. Then returned to it. Davos offered a charred horn of water. Jon drank, poured the rest over his hair, raked fingers through. He inhaled, exhaled, and swung into the harness once more. Leather stuck to fresh blood on Rhaegal's hide, but the dragon accepted the weight with a grunt. Jon raised a mailed fist. Stark horns trumpeted farewell. Then the dragon flung himself into the air, hind legs kicking sod, claws curling for purchase on empty sky. The ascent hurt. Every wing stroke shuddered through the fractured bones, translated into tremors that rattled Jon's ribs. But higher they rose. Wind tore at his cloak, flapped it like a half-torn banner. Below, the riverlands fell away in tilled squares of green and brown. Ahead, the Blackwater Bay reflected sickly orange under a ceiling of smoke that thickened into a thunderhead above the capital. Lightning flickered inside that man-made storm, some flashes born of natural charge, others of burning stores of wildfire bursting under new assault. Even before he tasted the cinder grit between teeth, Jon knew the city burned. They crossed the rush, wing shadow rippling over barges overloaded with refugees who rowed against current toward any shore but their own. On the northern bank, haphazard camps sprawled. A few nightly banners, but mostly terrified small folk, kneeling in circles around what goods they had saved. A septon raised shaking hands heavenward, voice lost in the roar of flame, and the dragon beats above. Rhaegal angled southeast, gliding now to spare his breath. The smoke grew denser, a bruise pressed against the sun so that daylight dimmed to sullen dusk. Shapes emerged. The gate of the gods belching civilians like ants from broken hive. The mud gate, a shattered maw where one leaf still hung by a single bronze hinge. The fish market, all puddles of molten silver, where stalls and scales and coins fused in an alchemist's nightmare. Jon felt his heart crack as he saw narrow streets he knew from boyish memories. Trod in Robert Baratheon's procession after the fall of the usurper. Glimpsed again during feasts with ever-jesting Tyrion, now caught in trails of fire that leapt palace to potshop, turning cobble to kiln. He rose in stirrups and scanned the sky. There, a black comet hurtling along the length of the great sept's ruins, scattering stone parapets like kicked chalk. Drogon Dotch. Jon could barely make out the rider, but he sensed her. Daenerys bent low, silver braid thrashing, sword of living flame in hand though no steel shone. She had become the blade itself. Rhaegal screamed a challenge so raw it scraped Jon's marrow. He urged pursuit. They crossed the breadth of Flea Bottom in 3 heartbeats, trailing an updraft of sparks. Drogon banked around the hill of Aegon's High Hill, now a charnel mound of toppled houses, and rose toward the Red Keep. Jon glimpsed crenellations wreathed in green blush, where wildfire reservoirs lurked beneath. Substances Cersei had buried, and Daenerys mined with hateful cunning. Sirens within Jon screamed hold back. The fire will kill all. But a deeper instinct overrode caution. If he lagged even a moment, Drogon's next pass might sever the castle hill from its cliff and pour red-hot rubble into the black water drowning thousands more. Rhaegal's wounded wing bucked at each upstroke. Blood seeped anew from bandages, speckling Jon's cheeks. He whispered apology and crouched low. The dragon pumped higher, striving for the high belly of the smoke cloud where they might drop unseen onto Drogon's tail. Below, on the ramparts, Lannister and Stark archers manned side by side, loosing hurried flights skyward, most arrowheads catching fire mid-arc, spiraling useless. Yet Jon felt pride to see them still trying, still believing a sliver of iron could turn catastrophe. Suddenly, a new form burst through smoke. Smaller, silver-white, darting with impossible agility. For one dizzy instant, Jon thought Viserion reborn, then recognized no dragon at all but a massive scorpion bolt, thick as a pine trunk, tipped with mirror-bright steel. Someone on the ramparts had rigged Qyburn's old engines and waited for clear shot. The quarrel whizzed past Rhaegal's nose, missing by a yard, then vanished into haze below. Drogon banked sharply, startled by the near-miss core. Jon seized the chance. He drove heels, and Rhaegal surged, closing the gap until the black dragon's trailing fumes washed over them in heat so ferocious it threatened to cook the marrow from Jon's bones. He tasted metal beneath his tongue, felt eyelashes crisp. "Dany," he bellowed. The wind tore name to tatters. He did not know if she heard, but Drogon twisted half around, presenting serrated maw. Rhaegal answered by snaking his neck forward in a raking bite that grazed Drogon's wounded wing again. Daenerys lurched in her saddle. Jon saw her clutch a leather strap to keep from pitching off. Both dragons toppled earthward, locked in furious grapple, wings flapping frantic, claws gouging ancient scars deeper. They smashed through smoke, past bell tower of the great sept that collapsed beneath them, bells clanging in final agony as stones clove into Iano. A gout of emerald wildfire erupted from catacombs below, engulfing the shattered nave. Its shockwave flung Drogon and Rhaegal apart like straw dolls in a storm. Jon's vision blurred green then black. He clung as Rhaegal spun, caught a thermal, and righted. Drogon had recovered first. He arrowed toward the Red Keep again, but slower, wing beats uneven. Jon glimpsed a new gash along the membrane where Rhaegal's teeth had torn fresh rents. Blood pattered rooftops like midnight rain. Rhaegal leveled. Jon's chest burned for air, but he forced lungs steady. He searched for an avenue not of flame but of words. He had to reach her. Physical triumph meant nothing if her grief and wrath remained. Victory over body would merely birth a martyr. He guided Rhaegal into a glide that paralleled Drogon's flight. 50 feet out. Slightly behind, the black dragon tilted an eye their way, slitted and inflamed. Jon raised a gauntleted hand, not in strike, not in guide, simply open to the sky. He shouted again, voice hoarse, "Daenerys!" This time she turned fully. The smoke parted just enough for their gazes to lock across the yawning void between beasts. Her face bore soot streaks and dried tears like cracked riverbeds. Yet beneath grime her features softened, as if some long-buried memory quickened to her name on his lips. The respite lasted one breath. A chorus of horns bloomed from the northern walls. The Tyrell roses, Glover pine, Baratheon-crowned stag of Gendry's new seal, all announcing the arrival of reinforcements. Beyond the river, sails blossomed. Saladhor San's fleet under Stark command, rowing hard with wind at their backs. Joy surged in Jon. Too soon. From south, over Cobbler Square, unsullied cohorts emerged in perfect lockstep, shields scorched yet shining. They filled alleys, clearing lanes with lethal efficiency, establishing corridors for retreating Dothraki. Above them, Grey Worm's personal banner flew. Black spear over red sunrise, though its bearer staggered, arrow through thigh. Even defeated, the Queen's army would not let her stand alone. Jon realized there would be no quiet surrender, only escalation until one ceased to draw breath or will, and the city would drown between them. He nudged Rhaegal closer, wincing at the hitch in the dragon's exhale. The green beast complied, driven by loyalty that felt at times like blind trust. Closing to mere yards now, Jon saw Daenerys' braid unraveling in wind, saw blood matting hair behind left ear. He also saw what she cradled with white-knuckled grip. A flask of wildfire, thin, brittle glass no bigger than a pitcher. Stopper corked by wax. A dragon's breath could ignite, but so could a hard toss against stone or scale. She meant to end it herself rather than yield. The knowledge struck like ice probed a heart. "Dany," he pleaded, voice ragged. "Look at them children below us. Those are not your enemies. The wheel you break is breaking on their backs. Please." His words reached her atop roar of conflagration. He read it in the flicker of her watery eyes. He also saw the iron band of grief that cinched her mouth. "They cheered while my child was nailed in Marine." She shouted back, the sentence mangled by wind yet enough. "They watched my friends beheaded. No more tyrants, Jon. No more chains." He spread arms, gesturing to surrounding ruin. "This is chains anew. Chains of fear. You told me in the crypts we will break the wheel together. Let us, but spare them." His palm pressed to his chest. "I swear by ice and fire, the Iron Throne will be yours if Mercy lives." A sob cut her voice. "Mercy killed Rhaegal. Mercy killed Missandei. Mercy kills women who cannot grow wings." She held the vial higher, catching weak sunlight. "Dracarys, and no child shall ever kneel to a tyrant again." Before she could hurl the glass, Jon acted. He spurred Rhaegal into a dive not at Drogon but under him, twisting so the green dragon's tail snapped upward. The blow cracked against Daenerys' wrist. The vial tumbled, spinning bright, plunging toward the courtyard of Maegor's holdfast. Jon willed that it shatter on bare stone where no wildfire pocket lurked. But fate remained cruel. It struck the lip of a parapet and erupted in a geyser of emerald fury that raced through a seam Cersei's masons had left open. A seam leading to caches buried beneath the Tower of the Hand. Green light blossomed outward, like a demon sun. The shockwave lifted Drogon and Rhaegal, both as if toys in a maelstrom. Jon lost grip. He felt weightlessness. Saw smoke swirl into fractal spirals. Heard nothing but the oceanic roar of displaced air. Then stone greeted him. He struck a slate roof, bounced, rolled through tiles, and plummeted onto an awning that ripped, then dumped him onto hay bales stacked against a stable wall. Pain burst through limbs. Hips, ribs, shoulder reopened. He groaned, tried to rise, failed. Straw burned around him where drifting cinders nested. Above, the Red Keep's western quarter folded inward. A tower sheared in half. Bricks spilled down the cliff face, tumbling into bay and raising steam pillars. Wildfire coursed veins through corridors, finding barrels stacked by desperate alchemists in dynasties past. Thunderclaps rolled as each horde detonated. The keep's proud silhouette warped into a monstrous bonfire. Jon forced himself upright. The world tilted. He spat blood. Shouldered past a scattering of small folk who fled with cages of frightened hens. Alley walls bled heat. He pressed deeper into maze he half remembered from visits long ago, using fragments of Tyrion's drunken tours to orient toward the godswood of the Red Keep, one of few open spaces large enough for a dragon to land. If Daenerys survived, she might seek ground there. He limped through a cracked postern that spilled into a courtyard choked by fallen tiles. Statues of Targaryen kings lay decapitated, black marble faces turned to weep molten tears. A roar pealed overhead. Drogon, spiraling lower, struggling to maintain lift. Jon followed. Half running, half stumbling, he burst onto the godswood. The ancient weirwood tree here was smaller than Winterfell's, but its leaves still whispered in unseen drafts, blood red against pale bark untouched by flames so far. At its roots Drogon lay coiled, wing twitching uselessly. One hind leg trembled, unable to fold fully. Daenerys had dismounted, and now leaned against the trunk, breathing shallow. Wildfire burns striped her leather, but the glass had spared her mortal wounds. Her eyes glittered fever bright as she regarded Jon's arrival. "No throne," she rasped. "Only ash." Jon glanced through ragged canopy. The throne room tower, once looming beyond gardens, now a stump wreathed in green smoke. the throne itself likely molten slag amid rubble. He thought of prophecies, of swords forged from tyranny, and felt angers recede into weary sorrow. "Let it be ash," he said, voice barely sound. "Only live. The realm can mend, but not if its queen dies." She laughed, a brittle tinkle. "Queen of what realm? Wolves rule the north. Lions plot return. Your river lords circle like vultures. You can still lead them, not with flame, but with temperance." He drew closer, slow as approaching a cornered deerhound. The gods would hush, seemed to hold breath. "We have both killed for lesser causes. I renew. I will stand beside you." She studied him, lashes sticking in clumps. "Stand or kneel?" "Nobody kneels to burnt thrones," he answered. "They follow hands extended, not fists aflame. Let the wheel break upon our open palms." Her gaze dropped to his outstretched hand, palm blood-streaked and shaking. She did not take it. Instead, she looked at Drogon, whose breaths grew thin, foam at nostrils. Tenderness softened her for an instant. A mother's ache. Then steel shuddered the emotion. "I am the blood of the dragon," she whispered, pushing off trunk. "And dragons plant no gardens." From her belt she drew a narrow dagger forged in ashai, black as void. Jon had never seen it before. She weighed it, eyes distant. "If I surrender, the realm will punish me. If I stand trial, they will call every burn my crime. They will tear Drogon's eggs from my body if they must." "No," Jon insisted. He closed the last steps until dagger's point hovered against his breast. He did not flinch. "I'll shield you. They will not reach you." "You cannot shield me from myself," she breathed. Her pupils dilated, overwhelming violet. "Mercy kills women who cannot grow wings. I must be mercy for them. Burning mercy. Only fear stops tyrants." Jon felt tremble under the blade, not of weapon but of hand. Doubt fissured her conviction. He seized it. He placed his hand over hers around the hilt. Her fingers were icy despite surrounding heat. "Fear grows tyrants," he whispered. "I believe in you, Daenerys Stormborn. Believe again in yourself." She blinked, a tear trailing through soot. The dagger dipped a hair. Her shoulders sagged. "I believed in a dream of children who would never know chains." Her voice cracked. "But every step took me farther from that shore until I could no longer see it. Am I become my enemies?" He exhaled. "Not yet. Not while choice remains." Gently, he guided the dagger hand aside, blade lowering. The gods' wood hush deepened. Leaves rustled overhead though the air seemed still. Drogon's rasp grew more fragile. The dragon's lids drooped. "We must save him," she murmured, twisting to kneel by his head. She stroked smoking scales, tears sizzling against hide. Jon moved to help, but she waved him back. "Your touch calms Rhaegal. Mine his." She pressed her brow to the dragon's, lips moving in Valyrian lullaby. Drogon's shudders settled. Jon scanned perimeter. No soldiers yet, though distant clangor carried. They needed maesters, water, maybe ice to soothe burns on monstrous flesh. He turned to fetch aid. Stopped. Daenerys had risen again, dagger reversed. Candle-thin muscles bunched in her arm, betrayal mixing with resignation in her damp eyes. Reflex and training saved him. He seized her wrist mid-stab, twisting outward. The blade clanged onto roots. She gasped, not from pain but despair. "Jon, they will cut my wings." "No," he gritted, gripping her shoulders. The gods would whirled behind tears. "I will not let them." He released, chest heaving. "We'll flee if must, north across shivering sea, beyond their reach. Dragons needed not rule to survive. We could seek Valyria's ruins." She shook head, hair lashing tears. "You speak of running from a shadow that follows inside me. Burn or be burned. There is no third path." "There is," he whispered, stepping close until their foreheads touched. "Forgive yourself." She sobbed, a shudder that racked slender frame. His arms gathered her. For a moment, They clung amid smell of sap and soot. Two survivors, neither hero nor villain, merely scarred remnants of quests too grand. He felt her heart drum, desperate hummingbird behind battered ribs. He whispered broken vows, of snow-soft nights in Winterfell's godswood, of surf against Dragonstow's rocks, of children unburdened by fear. She listened, tears soaking his mail, dagger forgotten. Footsteps crunched gravel. Jon turned. Tyrion approached, limping, face raw red from heat, one sleeve charred off. Behind lumbered Brienne and an honor guard of Stark and Lannister survivors, bearing buckets and stretchers. Daenerys stiffened in Jon's embrace, tears halting. She stepped back, wiping cheeks with the heel of her hand. Tyrion halted 10 paces distant, gaze ping-ponging between wreckage of the keep and Dragon Queen. "I have seen many follies," he croaked, voice cracked as pottery. "But torching one's own seat wins a crown of its own." Daenerys squared shoulders. The Iron Throne burned. Let a better one rise. Brienne inclined head, relief loosening tension from broad frame. The city still smolders. We need water trains through the Pomegranate Gate. Tyrion looked at Jon. The bells never rang, but they may yet, for surrender. Then to Daenerys. "Will you sound them?" She surveyed splintered ramparts, rivers catching emberlight, corpses sprawled across Bailey. When her eyes returned to Tyrion, something gentler lived there. Sorrow sharpened into wry acceptance. "Let them ring," she said. "For Queen Nyra of the Ashes, perhaps the last of her name." Jon sensed the self-lacerating jest. He lifted her chin. "No, for peace bought dear. Let them toll for the dead, and for dawn to come." She nodded once. Tyrion turned to guards. "Find any bell left upright." A Lannister piper answered from corridor. "The sept bells lie in ruin, but the halls of Baelor's library have chimes." Tyrion waved. "Then ring books if needed. Only ring." The soldiers dispersed. Brienne knelt beside Drogon with water skins, coaxing charred lips, apart to pour trickles that hissed on inner furnace, yet soothed cracked tongue. The dragon gazed with wary wonder at the tall knight. Brienne smiled, tears streaking soot. Jon zagged onto a root, weariness crushing. Daenerys settled beside him. They watched Rhaegal limp through smoke from distant square, guided by Davos and a dozen Northmen waving torches to clear path. When he reached the Godswood, Drogon lifted head, low croon escaping. Rhaegal answered with softer rumble. They touched snouts like siblings parted long in storm. Somewhere above, a bell clanged. Discordant, half-shattered, but clear enough. Another followed, steadier. Then a chorus rose as militia found still hanging bells, as knights hammered shields to echo. The sound spread across the ruins, a grief-laden hymn that nonetheless carried promise. The city called cease to horror. Flames still danced, but bucket chains marched. Unsullied laid shields to pave safe corridors for bucket-bearers. Northmen propped ladders where walls crumbled. Dothraki herded panicked citizens away from unstable beacons of stone. It was messy, halting, yet direction existed where madness reigned before. Sansa arrived near dusk, cloak hem black with river mud, hair plastered to scalp by sweat and drizzle of ash. She embraced Jon fiercely, bowed to Daenerys with a tension near snapping. But Daenerys surprised them both by kneeling before the Lady of Winterfell. "I broke your walls," she said. "Help me mend them." Sansa's eyes widened, then softened. She extended a hand. They pulled each other up. Night came. Exhausted souls collapsed where they could. Noble, small folk, sellsword, united by bone-deep depletion. Jon found himself beside Tyrion and Grey Worm among charred trunks. The air still warm, but no longer feverish. The commander of the Unsullied bore chain manacles after capture, yet sat free, wrists resting atop knees. Tyrion's order. He watched the dragons. Silent. Jon approached. "We sought same liberation," he said quietly. Grey Worm's voice when it came was ragged. "She freed me. I would die so she remains free." He glanced at shackles. "Yet I see she chooses grain over fire tonight." He removed the chains, dropped them at Jon's feet, and walked into the dark to help dig firebreak trenches. Jon exhaled. Weeks passed. Gentle rains quenched lingering embers. Fishermen returned to piers where water steamed, but no longer boiled. Orphan children were gathered into makeshift creches, under the supervision of Septus, who sang lullabies amid rubble. From the smoking crater that once bore the Iron Throne, foundations of a new council chamber rose, designed by Tyrion and drawn in charcoal, on spare parchment, during sleepless nights. It would seat equals: Stark, Targaryen, Baratheon, Martell, Tyrell, Greyjoy, Arryn, and any others who came in peace. The Crownlands would be stewarded by a Tryon, Daenerys as protector of the realm, Sansa recalling the rights of winter, and Gendry Baratheon, bastard no more, voicing small folk through his own forge-scorched lens. They eschewed titles of queen and king, calling themselves simply wardens of the realm until such time as the realm deemed. But folk still called Jon the Dragon Wolf, half legend, half anchor. Some lords balked, some schemed. But each time fresh outrage brewed, bells tolled from half-rebuilt towers, reminders of what silence after bells cost. Merchants came to call the city Belhaven, though none could explain origin to newcomers without voice lowering. The dragons healed. Rhaegal flew first, gingerly, wing braced in leather sling. Drogon followed weeks later, black sails patch-stitched with silver thread by seamstresses, who likened it to darning impossible banners. When they finally soared together, thousands watched from rooftops, some cheering, some kneeling, most merely staring with open wonder at shapes once harbingers of doom, now painting sky in loops of quiet grace. Jon and Daenerys walked hand in hand through markets where children sold carvings of green and black dragons perched atop wolf heads. They did not announce themselves, letting illusions of privacy cloak them. At a baker's stall, they tasted lemon cakes made from the first shipment of Reach fruit since fires, lemon zest still faint from scarcity. Daenerys' eyes watered at the brightness, perhaps from spice, perhaps something deeper. One evening atop the ramparts, Jon found her alone, staring into a bay turned mirror by sunset. He joined, leaned elbows beside her. Waves lapped like the breath of a sleeping giant. "I wake," she said, "and wait for screaming. It does not always come. That frightens me more." He nodded. Some scars grow quiet, but skin remembers. He pulled from pocket a single pearl clasp. "Lyanna's? Polished anew?" He placed it in her palm. "Promise to walk beside me even when screams sleep. We will remind each other what fires consumed." She closed fingers around Pearl. "Together we break wheels," she whispered. Far below, a bell clanged, this one cast from fresh bronze, tuned by smiths under Gendry's exacting eye. It chimed thrice each dusk as symbol. One for past, one for present, one for hope. Its tone washed over battlements, through cinder-scarred streets, and outward to fertile fields where seeds already sprouted green among black. Jon drew Daenerys into the crook of his arm. Dragons winged overhead, silhouettes inked against ember sky, gliding not as harbingers but as guardians. And in the hush left by the bell's fading echo, the city exhaled. No longer quite King's Landing, not yet some bright new name, but alive with possibility, forging itself day by day from ash, iron, and the stubborn will of people determined never again to bow to fear. The winter roses bloomed late that first spring. Petals washed a pale steel blue instead of true stark white, perhaps for all the soot still knotted in the soil of the Crownlands. They sprouted between fallen flagstones where noble gardeners had once coaxed imported orchids. Now they grew wild, their fragile grace prying apart mortar that imperial masons had sworn eternal. Booth heels cracked a few stems each morning. By dusk new buds unfurled, as if the city itself insisted on reminding every passerby that death and renewal were root and branch of the same vine. Jon often paused to smell them on his patrols across the half-finished ramparts. The scent was faint, more memory than fragrance. But if he closed his eyes, he could convince himself of frost-fang breezes and the hush of a Winterfell dawn. Each time, He carried one bloom back to the temporary council chamber. An airy loggia overlooking the ruin where the throne of 1,000 swords had melted into slag. He never said why he brought them. He simply laid the stems on Daenerys' papers and watched her slow smile appear like sunrise through fog. By the first name day of the peace, that was what the small folk called it, as though a bloody miracle deserved capitalization. The shapes of new governance began to feel less like scaffolding and more like living bone. Edmure Tully's envoys wheeled wagon loads of Riverlands timber into the city, bartered for Dornish citrus and Tyrell cheeses. On Moonsinger's quay, ironborn traders opened casks of black-powdered herring while Tyroshi glassblowers embedded chips of wildfire green slag into panes that refracted light along the remade avenues. The council met thrice a week beneath the half-built dome that Tyrion nicknamed the Lantern, because every discussion seemed to wobble like a candle in a draught. Gendry, all shoulders and earnest frown lines, would hammer the table with a smith's instinct whenever debate drifted toward airy theory. An anvil doesn't care a whit for words. What metal do we strike? How hot, and with whom? Sansa countered with details razor sharp enough to shave a maester's quill. Grain quotas, night watch rotations, licensing for refugee markets along the Rose Red. Daenerys spoke less than any of them, yet each sentence shifted the room's axis, as a dragon's wing can tilt an entire weather system by accident. Jon listened. He learned. And when the hourglass emptied its copper sand, he stood and walked the city, the only lesson he trusted more than direwolf instinct. That was how he found himself one gray afternoon crouched beside a sputtering sewer grate between Cobbler Square and the Dragon Pit slope, inspecting clumps of greasy ash that clogged the iron mesh. A rat scurried away, trailing stringy black lumps. Behind him lumbered a barrel-chested man in baker's linen. "Beggin' pardon, lord," the man huffed, wiping soot on a flour dust apron. "We clear them each dawn, but come midday the muck's back. Whole Low Street tastes like tallow." Jon fingered the residue. It smeared under a thumbnail, oily and green at the edges. Wildfire still seeping from cracked catacombs despite a year of bucket lines and ceiling mortar. He inhaled. The faint, acrid bite yanked him back to the day the sky went emerald. Rage flickered, brief but sharp. "Tell your neighbors the crown will send stonecutters to dig vents," he said. "Block the side channels so runoff reaches the river." The baker hesitated. "Stonecutters want silver stags we don't have." And the Dothraki lads, begging again, ride through of a night, swinging their fire toys. One spark, and... He trailed off, eyes glazing with a memory too recent. Jon laid a steady hand on the man's shoulder. "Give me 2 days. If they haven't come, find the Dragon's Gate and ask for the Dragon Wolf. I'll ride with the cutters myself." "And now?" The baker's expression shifted from doubt to startled gratitude. "7 bless you, lord." As the man hurried off, Jon heard soft bootfalls behind him. He straightened, brushing grime from black leather. Arya leaned against a half-collapsed cornice, arms folded, eyes glinting that silent amusement which always preceded mischief. "You still smell of smoke when you lie," she said. "I didn't lie." "You did. You said 2 days with no promise from the Masons." She walked a tight circle around him, studying posture, boots, every nick in his vambrace. "You'll hire them out of your own purse if the crown balks." "Which means the lie was to yourself." He exhaled, a puff of white in cold spring air. "I'd rather carry stone than draft more proclamations." Spoken like a man avoiding something. She tilted her head. "Or someone." He met her gaze, rueful. "I can't keep her in council chambers forever. The realm must see her." "Then let them." A shrug cut through her wolf-gray cloak. "A monarch who reeks of ash may still rule if people trust her heart. The queen you love, brooding crow." "Bendo." "I'm not brooding." She laughed, a quick, bright bark that melted into the bustle of smiths hammering down the lane. "You're always brooding. Even when you smile, it's just brooding with upturned lips. Tell me the truth. What dreams steal your sleep?" He considered. "The same ones that always did. Ghost hunts in the Frostfangs." Father's words at the weirwood. The wall? He paused, then forced out the curse he seldom dared. And the pit I dug in my own chest when I let her burn. Arya's gaze softened. You didn't let her. That day burned us all. But every dawn since, she's chosen water instead of flame. Then? He rubbed thumb against the oily smear still drying under his nail. For how long? Arya's answer emerged after a heartbeat's deliberation. As long as you stand with her. That night, storm clouds banked over the bay. Jon climbed the scaffolding of the lantern, raindrops pelting his cheeks, to find Daenerys alone beneath the rising ribs of the dome. She was studying rolled vellum, pinned by 2 broken bricks. Plans for a canal network to divert floodwaters from low districts. A hooded lantern at her elbow guttered with each damp gust, painting her profile in shifting amber. He watched a minute before speaking. 3 of your guards sparred the Dothraki today over dice. No blood spilled, but tongues sharpen faster than steel when pockets are empty. She did not startle. She rarely did. Raznak asked for more coin. The treasury's answer will wait until the Reach harvest arrives. I have nothing to fill their pockets but words. Jon closed the distance, rain hissing off pauldrons. Words from your mouth weigh more than gold lions. Not enough. She brushed wet hair from her forehead. Cell sails circle like sharks, waiting for pay routes to slip. Hire one ship too few. Pirates swarm the galleys and we starve. Hire one too many. Coffers bleed before next levy. She exhaled, then murmured, I traded a throne for an abacus. He laid a winter rose on the vellum. A droplet slid from petal to parchment, smudging the ink canal into a blue-gray rivulet. Her lips parted. The softest intake. Come with me, he said. She frowned gently. Again? Last time you dragged me through river mud to inspect cistern foundations. Not tonight. He offered a rough-knuckled hand. A healer from Karth arrived. Says she has salve for dragonhide. Drogon still limps on damp mornings. Daenerys hesitated only a breath, then slipped her fingers into his. They descended scaffolds, trod echoing halls where stone dust coated every sill, and emerged onto the moonlit terrace facing the gutted hillside. 2 dragons dozed in the half-cleared bowl of the old dragon pit. Drogon curled into black coils. Rhaegal splayed like a verdant tapestry. At the fringe, torches marked the Karthine healers mixing oils in bronze bowls. Thunder muttered offshore, but the dragons barely roused. Jon and Daenerys crossed singed gravel until heat from Drogon's breath warmed their boots. She knelt, pressing palm to scaled brow. Drogon opened one crimson eye, snorted, and sighed plume upon her cloak. Try, old friend. She whispered in Valyrian. The salve stinks, but so did my first taste of wine. The Karthine woman approached, a slender figure wrapped in gauzy indigo. She bowed, revealed a jar smelling of lavender and sea salt tar. Jon took the jar, scooped a palmful, and spread the salve along the scored ridges of Drogon's foreleg, while Daenerys worked the thicker cracks. The dragon's eyelids fluttered. A sound like feline contentment rumbled. Daenerys paused, fingers still slick with balm. Rain ticked on Drogon's flank. There are moments, she said softly, when I forget the screams. The salve scent, his breath, tiny patches of normal. Jon massaged another streak into gummy hide. Hold to them. Build outward. She studied him, lantern light glinting in violet eyes. Can I ask you something dangerous? You've asked me nothing safe since the day we met. Do you still dream of riding north, leaving courts behind? His hand stilled. Some nights. But the north no longer needs me. Here does. He wiped residue on trousers, met her gaze. I choose this hearth, ash and all. Her shoulders eased, as though admitting she'd braced for a different answer. Rain intensified, drumming a lullaby upon Drogon's scales. She leaned her head against Jon's damp shoulder. He shifted to shelter her, though both were soaked already. For a time they sat, dragons breathing around them like giant bellows, until the Carthene woman signaled the salve had done its part. Weeks turned serpentine. Summer crept in on humid winds. Refugee shanties along the Roserat budded into proper districts with straw thatch and clay chimneys. Tyrion's lantern gained a copper skin that mirrored afternoon clouds in blistered sheets. And in the half-light of new dawns, rumors sprouted, of gold cloaks plotting restoration of Baratheon rule, of iron-born captains forging pacts with stepstone corsairs, of a shadow guild in Bravos wagering a formidable contract on the life of a queen. It began with a patch of white feathers found on a cobblestone behind the old ironmonger's guild. Then a beggar turned up stiff in an alley, lips purpled by stranger's kiss, a mark famously favored by the sorrowful men of Korth. The court dismissed that order as near extinct, but Varys had once muttered, before meeting Wildfire, that assassination cults never truly died. They merely toggled slumber. Jon listened to the reports brought by Davos and the spiders surviving little birds, orphans who now served Sansa's intelligence web. Though skeptical at first, he remembered the blue-lipped corpse of Euron Greyjoy at Dragonstone, killed by a poison that matched sorrowful men lore. The threat felt plausible, perhaps inevitable. The question burned: how to protect Daenerys without imprisoning her in her own city again? The answer arrived in the shape of Sandor Clegane, still scarred but leaner after months overseeing stone quarries beyond the Blackwater. He strode into council unannounced, slapped dust off boiled leather gauntlets, and growled, "If crows circle the henhouse, put a hound beneath the roost." Tyrion's brows locked. "You volunteer?" Clegane spat, barely missing the rose in Daenerys's vase. "I guard my own hide by guarding hers. Assassins fancy poisons and slips of silk, but they shy from jaws." Thus the Queen's shadow was born. The name amused Arya, an unsubtle shade, she quipped. But no one denied Sandor's presence beside Daenerys at public audiences carried a deterrent weight measured in growls and steel. Summer deepened. On the Feast of the Maiden, bells tolled midday for 100 pirate pennants surrendered at the Gullet. Salladhor Saan bowed before the council, pockets jingling, to accept a pardon in exchange for piloting crown convoys. Daenerys dressed in azure samite that rippled like the summer sea, her hair woven with 3 interlocking braids, a nod to the past yet open to rebraiding. She thanked Salladhor, then turned to the crowd of small folk admitted for the feast. "You have traveled far," she said, voice pitched to Carrie. "You brought your hopes, your wounds, your stories of loss. I promise you not perfection, but progress." She raised a cup of watered wine, the crowd mirrored with clay mugs. "To tomorrow, and the right to see it." Cheers thundered. Yet in that jubilance, Jon's instincts prickled. He scanned balconies, banners, the tangle of applauding hands. On a ledge above the entry arch, a slender silhouette lingered, hood masking face in shadow, though sun blazed. A glint, to needlepoint of light, caught his eye. A crossbow quarrel? No, too small. Something metallic flicked between the figure's fingers. He shifted to intercept, but before he could take 2 strides, Arya materialized from the throng, melted up the stair, and reached the ledge. The hooded figure pivoted, dagger shining with milky sheen of Myrish poison. Arya's sword flashed truly, a muffled scuffle, a gasp. Then the hood slipped to reveal a woman with dyed teardrop on cheekbone, sigil of the sorrowful men. The assassin sagged, slit throat raining dark onto ancient stone. Arya wiped needle on the corpse's cloak and met Jon's gaze across the courtyard, expression sober, almost mournful. The festivities limped to closure. That night 17 suspects were dragged from wine cellars, their tongues loosened by Cohoric truth chalk. The plot mapped back to a Braavosi coin house owing vast debts to slave trade magnates enraged by Daenerys' liberation edicts. Tyrion pushed for letters of marque. Daenerys argued for patient diplomacy. Sansa proposed silent seizure of the coin house western assets. A strike without blood but felt in every purse. Jon agreed. Within weeks, Taroshi envoys begged peace, their ledger books bleeding red. But blood did spill again. In early autumn, Ironborn reavers attempted kidnap of Lord Gendry's young cousin. As he toured grain outposts near Maidenpool, the boy survived thanks to Brienne's quick sword work, but 3 stable grooms died. Jon led a tidal force of cavalry across the Trident's delta, routing the raiders, capturing half their fleet. He stood on the deck of a battered longship, wind flaying salt into his hair, and offered the captains a choice: return to Pike bearing a treaty that outlawed slave raids under pain of dragonfire, or breathe brine through split throats. They chose parchment, though grudgingly. Winter, ever fickle, hinted at return by frostfall. Columns of geese arrowed south. Iron wind scoured the bay. Construction crews raced to cap the lantern's dome with weather-ward copper. In the library of the Broken Sept, scribes inked the first charter of the Free Cities Trade Consortium, negotiated haggardly by Davos through nights of mulled cider. Jon seldom kept to chambers. His body itched for walls and ramparts. On one such inspection, he ran into Grey Worm drilling squads in a courtyard, their spears stamped cobble with unified thuds, echoing across marble colonnades. Faces once unreadable now bore faint humor. Quick smiles traded between volleys of thrusts. Jon noticed a girl, brown hair plaited in Dornish rings, watching from a windowsill. Cheeks flushed whenever Grey Worm glanced her way. After drill, Jon approached him. The crown owes you land in Enniath if you still desire. The sea's calm in winter. Grey Worm wiped sweat. Naeth waits. But some men wish to stay. He nodded toward the window. The girl vanished with shy swiftness. We build orphan barracks here. They call me tutor. A glimmer of something like pride touched his gaze. I tell them how chains break. Jon clasped his forearm. Chains break best under many hammers. Later, in the quiet hour before curfew, Jon climbed to the lantern's highest catwalk. Below, 1,000 candles flickered in every rebuilding district, little galaxies of fragile flame. He felt dazed by tenderness for it all. Rats and roses, sewage and bells, unsullied hopes by the cartload. A gust tugged his cloak, and suddenly he knew, without turning, that Daenerys stood behind him. She slipped arms around his waist, chin upon his shoulder. I missed you at supper, she murmured. I rode inspection of the new cistern pumps. She chuckled. Olive bread waited. It went stale for your devotion. I'll chew it hard for penance. He covered her hands with his. Arya saved you again. And herself, Daenerys corrected. She and I spoke tonight. She said death feeds on regrets unspoken. Her breath warmed his collar. So speak yours. He hesitated, sensing the path's edge. Then, I fear loving you means failing you. One lapse, one breath too slow. Jon. She turned him to face her. Stormlight from distant fires danced along the silver in her braid. So he saw both the Dragon Queen and the woman who laughed at burnt lemon cakes. If love could seal the realm, we would be done. But realms live on decisions. His jaw clenched. Then let me make one. Marry me, before the realm forgets why it hoped. Her eyes widened. Terror, wonder, both. I vowed no crowns, no kneelings. This union is no crown. It is a forge. He took her hand, pressed it to his heartbeat. Temper me, and I temper you. Wind coiled around them. Far below, a bell pealed 9 times for the 9th hour, a long, resonant tone that swept above city smell. Daenerys' lips parted, as if to speak, then closed. She looked over the rooftops, saw Rhaegal roosting on the broken tower like a living gargoyle, Drogon circling beyond, and she gave a quiet nod that was both surrender and claim. A fortnight of fevered preparation followed. The council wrangled precedents of vows, northern rites, Targaryen tradition, or Septon blessings. They compromised. A godswood ceremony within the Red Keep's new courtyard, a weirwood branch planted from Winterfell's heart tree, and an open invitation to Septons for hymns after. Tyrion joked they were inventing polyfaith politics. Gendry hammered ceremonial rings from dragonglass and river iron. Arya threatened any bard who dared compose syrupy ballads. On the morning of the wedding, thin snow flurried over tiled roofs. dusting ash-dark scars with fleeting purity. Jon, dressed in charcoal wool sewn with ghost-gray stitching, Ghost himself padded silent at his heel. Daenerys wore no crown, only a mantle of dove-gray trimmed in embroidered flames so subtle they resembled rising smoke. Around her neck gleamed a pearl wolf clasp, dipped in obsidian dust. They met beneath the young weirwood, pale trunk still slender, red leaves sparse. Bran Stark had journeyed south for this, wheeled into place by Podrick. His eyes, ever half on unseen winds, focused clear and bright for the vows. "I see threads," Bran intoned, voice neither boy nor ancient. Threads of ice and fire braided into a cord strong enough to moor nations, with witness of gods old and new bind hands and hearts. Jon and Daenerys clasped wrists. Silk ribbon the color of sunrise was wrapped thrice around by Sansa, her fingers cool but steady. The crowd, nobles, small folk, unsullied, Dothraki, iron-born captives set free, stood in resonance of silence, broken only by the hush of snowflakes. When the ribbon knot tightened, the dragons roared in unison. Their thunder shook chandeliers still missing half their crystals. Bells pealed spontaneously from towers. Singers picked up a refrain half rehearsed, half improvised. And across the hinterlands, ravens winged news to every holdfast. The dragon wolf and the dragon queen had wed. Night celebrated with bonfires along the reconditioned streets. Wine flowed, Dornish peppers spit juice on glowing coals. Laughter spilled from throats raw with song. In the high chamber of the almost finished lantern, Jon and Daenerys shared quiet beyond the revel. She traced the map of scars across his chest. He memorized the silvered pattern of hair against her temple. Words seemed thin parchment beside the stark beating of blood. They let silence speak half the vows left unsaid. The new year unfurled under comets of migrating swifts, under tax ledgers that balanced more often than they bled, under steady hum of forges, shaping nails for fresh roofs. Yet peace, by its nature, is a dance upon cracked ice. A raven from Winterfell tore a seam in tranquility. White harbor ships sighted sails bearing the Kraken sigil south of Skagos, more numerous than treaty allowed. The Vale's Lord Robin Arryn, grown into nervous adulthood, feared a pincer from sea on Gulltown. He begged intervention. The council convened before dawn, embers still glimmering in braziers. Tyrion outlined supply lines, Davos flagged risk to grain convoys. Sansa argued for diplomacy first. Asha Greyjoy, present as Pike's ambassador, snorted derision, swore no kin of hers raided north. Jon stood, voice low, but unyielding. If these Krakens hunt slaves, they break blood vows to my queen. If they simply fish, we negotiate catch limits, but we sail at once to learn truth. He turned to Daenerys. "Will you ride Rhaegal?" She shook her head. "The realm can't afford both dragons gone. Drogon and I stay, you and Rhaegal scout." She offered the pearl clasp from her throat. "Bring this back untarnished." He kissed her palm, then strode for armory. Within the hour, riggings creaked under a brisk easterly. Rhaegal soared overhead, shadow sliding across silver waves. Gendry joined the voyage, curiosity and a hammer desire to test new ship plate. Arya stowed away, of course, discovered only when Ghost growled at a barrel that sneezed. Jon rolled eyes but let her stay. Better those blades beside him than behind. The journey north proved eerie, seas calm as glass, yet air thick with unseen intent. On the third dusk, sails ghosted over horizon. Black, gold-rimmed, kraken-crowned. Through glass Jon counted 23. Raiders by design, lean and fast. Yet they flew no slaver pennants. Instead, deck banners bore a new sign. A chained kraken split in half. Surrender? Warning? Rowboats hailed them under dusk's bruised pallet. A gaunt priestess of the drowned god stood in the prow, hair plastered in seaweed plaits. Her voice, when raised, carried salt and sorrow across water. The black tide does not come for blood. It comes for absolution. Euron's shade stirs in the deeps. His drowned sins churn whirlpools off Pike's coast. We seek dragonfire to cauterize the maelstrom. Memoir. Jon exchanged wary glances with Davos. The Onion Knight muttered, priest politics smell fouler than bilge. He advised caution, yet the fleet did indeed head, not south to raid but west towards Iron Islands. After Raven relays to Dragonstone and sleepless nights of charts, Jon agreed to escort them. Rhaegal flew low over slate waters, guiding through fog banks that clung like grave shrouds. Upon reaching Pike, they saw the Maelstrom, a vortex where two currents collided, widening yearly. Locals whispered Euron's corpse, chained to a stone anchor by his mutinous crew, spun still in those depths, cursing storms. Twice fishing boats vanished when nets snagged bone where bone should not be. Jon walked the shattered causeway of Pike with Asha, salt spume coating their cloaks. She spat into wind. Old ghosts. But ghosts rally fear. Fear rallies captains. She squinted at swirling waters. If Dragonflame seals the rift, so be it. But Greyjoys bow famine before fire. Dan soir. They crafted a plan. At ebb tide, Rhaegal would breathe fire across the whirling crest while ships ringed the perimeter to douse stray sparks. Jon hesitated. Seawater and flame seldom paired safely. But the Krakens insisted. Their priests chanted of trials by water and cleansing by fire. At dawn's pale blush, he mounted Rhaegal on a cliff ledge. Arya watched from rock spire, wind whipping hair. She signed a silent vow. Swift shadows guard slow dragons and vanished into spray. Rhaegal launched, wings clipping spindrift. The vortex churned, a snarling mouth. Jon signaled. The dragon's chest convulsed. A jet of green-gold flame pummeled the water. Steam exploded, clouding vision. The sea shrieked. Jon felt Rhaegal buck. Magnetic currents or deeper thing tugged. He banked hard. Below, the Maelstrom's eye flashed emerald then collapsed, sucking flame down throat. Water heaved outward, then stilled. Unnaturally sudden. Silence roared. Asha's flagship pitched but steadied. Waves receded like timid children. For a breath, calm reigned. Then something breached. Black wood. Bloated rope. Euron's flagship silence risen half from watery grave. Hull cracked but sail still emblazoned with screaming eye. A chill needle speared Jon's spine. From ragged deck, shapes lurched. Drowned sailors, pallid and barnacle-studded, their sockets glowing faint green from wildfire echo. By all gods, Davos muttered as he watched from prow. The undead crew raised rusted axes, silent as the hush before heartbreak. On the cliff, Arya drew breath sharp. Jon felt Rhaegal tense. Every instinct shouted burn, yet flames had birthed this horror. He banked, loosing only a short burst to sever the ship's mainmast. The silence cracked, toppling rigging onto deck thralls. But they swarmed along gunwales, seeking any living flesh nearby. Ironborn longboats recoiled. Some rowers leapt into sea in terror. Jon dove for the ruin, landing Rhaegal atop sagging deck timbers. A wave of heat and fear battered him. He unstrapped, drew Longclaw, and met the first drowned thing at the rail. Its flesh tore like rotted cloth beneath Valyrian steel. Yet more erupted from hatches, dripping sea lice. Arya appeared amid-rigging, needle flickering silver. Asha's warriors clambered over starboard, axes swinging. At the quarterdeck, a massive silhouette emerged. Euron's corpse, chains fused to shoulders, pulled by unseen will. One eye still glistened sapphire. The other oozed black rot. It swung a corroded blade that hissed smoke where seawater sloughed. Jon advanced. The damp stench staggered him, but he forced step by step. "You died under red sky," he growled. "Stay dead." The corpse's jaw cracked open. No words, only guttural keening. It lunged. Jon parried, sparks flaring. The monster's chain whipped, snagged Jon's pauldron, yanked him forward. He twisted, kicked sea-softened ribs. The chain snapped free of flesh, but corpse did not relent. Arya vaulted from above, burying Valyrian dagger in the creature's good eye. A vivid jet of black ichor sprayed. The corpse convulsed. Jon drove Longclaw through sternum, straight to anchor chain. Green sparks erupted. Dragon glass shards embedded deep, still alive with wildfire memory. Flesh ignited from within. Euron's husk collapsed in flames that hissed but did not drown. With their anchor fallen, the other drowned sailors shrieked voided wills. They slumped as if marionette strings cut, sinking into bilge water. Silence finally lived up to her name. Flames crawled along timbers. Jon signaled Rhaegal skyward. The dragon grabbed him with talon, lofted him clear as Arya and Asha scrambled to ropes. Longboats towed them off minutes before the hulk groaned and slid into closing vortex. Sea closed calm. Only floating embers told the tale. Asha clasped Yon's forearm aboard her deck. Pike stands indebted. I'll leash raiders short, on my honor. Her dangerous grin returned. Save your dragonfire for warmer seas, Stark King. When Jon returned south weeks later, autumn gold tinted the Crownland's oaks. Daenerys greeted him on the ramparts, hair whipped by briny wind, shoulders wrapped in wolf-trimmed cloak. He pressed the pearl clasp into her palm untarnished. She answered by kissing back the salt of voyage. Peace never stayed still, but it breathed. In flickers, Jon glimpsed futures. A university rising where Mad King's dungeons once brooded. Orphan battalions training as city watch. Marketplaces where Dornish spiced wine stalled beside northern honeymead, haggled with laughter, not blades. Years unfolded. The Lantern Dome aged from copper to lapis patina. Children chased each other across plazas still indented by dragon talons. Sansa's twins, red-haired girl, solemn boy, visited each summer, feeding pigeons crumbs of lemon cake left over from their uncle's overfilled plate. Gendry taught guild apprentices to temper alloys unknown in Westeros, forging wheel-free plows that turned Blackwater fields rich as Dorne's valleys. Grey Worm sailed at last with 50 veterans to Neath, tasked by Daenerys to protect the butterfly-kissed isle from slavers forever. His farewell carved a hollow in camp hearts, yet letters returned thrice yearly, describing coconut groves and laughter among children who'd never seen chains. Winter came soft, then wild. A frost deeper than recent memory locked rivers under glass. Ice wraith myths teased campfires, but no true threat stirred beyond the wall. Jon journeyed north each solstice to keep watch, leaving Daenerys to rule in Lantern's glow. She missed him fiercely but understood. Some vows required snow-laced silence to renew their power. In their 5th year, Bran dispatched a raven dire urgent. Fissures in the wall where cold seeped from ancient spells unraveling. Jon and Daenerys flew north together, Rhaegal and Drogon wheel to wheel through polar gusts. At Castle Black, they found Tormund's kin maintaining beacons along ragged breach points. No others walked, yet enchantments pulsed faint and failing. Bran met them below the shattered gate, eyes whited as winter hairs. Magic does not vanish, he said. It changes address. He reached to pat Drogon's snout. Some of it dwells in you now. With Bran's guidance, the dragons breathed coordinated flame over ice fractures. The wall drank heat, stones glowed. Fissures sealed like molten glass, then hardened stronger than before. Veins of obsidian threading mortar. Jon sensed an answering hum deep in his bones, as if ancient watch oaths resettled within him, satisfied. When they flew south, spring chased them. Thaw rippled rivers, crocus spears breached snow crusts. In King's Landing, by then called Belhaven, officially, though seafarers still preferred Queen's Roost, bells rang to welcome the Dragonkeepers. Crowds threw petals of winter roses bleached white to mark fresh beginnings. Years taught them compromise sharper than sword edges. They faced locust swarms in the Reach, drought across Dorne, and a Braavosi embargo that starved treasury. Yet each threat forged new alliances. Myrish water engineers diverted canals. Tyrell saplings replaced dead vines. Dornish water caravans hauled cisterns north for half a harvest share. Children, at last, graced the lantern-lit halls. A girl first, Nira, born during a thunderstorm that rattled every pane. Yet she slept through it, fist curled around a silver wolf figurine. 2 years later, A boy, Rhaegal, arrived under dawn bell chimes, his first cry so strong every midwife laughed wearily. The dragons guarded nursery towers. Ghost dozed across thresholds, nose to tail. Parenthood wove fresh threads into governance. Playpens in council rooms. Lullabies replacing late-night arguments. Treaties considered in light of what tales their children would inherit. Jon learned to draft milk-stewed oats between war reportees. Daenerys discovered the sharp diplomacy of toddlers, dividing toy soldiers. Once, during a lullaby night, "Will our dragons outlive them?" Jon kissed her temple. Yes, but stories last longer than flesh. Together they resolved to shape stories worth repeating. They sponsored archives of commoner chronicles, fishers, bakers, sellsword cadets. All voices bound beside kings in parchment script. They limited the crown's term of highest decree. Any edict older than 10 winters required assembly reconfirmation. And they reinstated the Night's Watch not as wallkeepers, but as border cordon and wildlife guard. Sworn to track migrations before predators starved. When Jon turned 40, Sansa organized a feast in the square where wildfire once erupted, now tiled with veined marble. Guests ranged from stepstone pirates turned merchants to Edethi ambassadors, draped in butterfly silk. Asha presented a keg of sea salt rum. Grey Worm sent a curl of conchhorn that moaned hauntingly across fest grounds. Tyrion gifted a miniature metal wheel broken into 8 spokes, each engraved with a sigil of the new council, mounted in glass to remind them that wheels might break yet still symbolize unity. At evenings, Arya appeared beside Jon, gray streak in hair, still restless as horizon. She pulled him aside and pressed into his palm a folded scrap of parchment. "Maps to lands west of maps," she whispered. "If seas turn kind, I'll send word. Tell Daenerys I borrow her compass." She vanished before tears could gather. They watched her sail next dawn. Salidhor's swiftest caravel slicing sea mist toward sunset. Nyra and Rhaegal waved rags of colored cloth until the mast disappeared. Jon's throat ached. Daenerys threaded fingers through his, silent. Years later, a raven reached Lantern Spire. A new archipelago found beyond chart, its largest isle crowned in meadow, where direwolves roamed unafraid. Arya's seal, a faceless coin bisecting sun and moon, promised bridges of trade. Belhaven bustled to build westward fleets. Time set about its hush work. Ghost's muzzle grayed. Tyrion's wine became watered for gout. Davos retired to a seaside cottage lined with driftwood shelves of knickknacks. When he passed peacefully, one crisp dawn, bells tolled low. Fishermen lit lanterns along every pier from the arbor to the stepstones, their reflections a river of stars for his soul to sail. Jon and Daenerys aged more gracefully than most suspected. Perhaps dragon blood ran thicker. Perhaps love stoked longevity. On their 30th anniversary, they ascended the lantern's zenith as sun sank copper. Beneath, Belhaven lay alive. Canals mirrored bark lanterns. Rooftops sprouted potted lemon trees. Children chased dragon kites, whose tails snapped like bright pennants. Daenerys leaned on parapet. Did we break the wheel? Jon considered gulls swirling above grain barges. We cracked the rim. People choose whether spokes stay broken. She smiled, lines fine at eyes. People will falter, and others will rise. He slid arm around her waist. Ace roses did in ash. Below, a wind stirred. Rustling winter rose bushes now multiplied across plazas, blue petals gleaming dusk silver. Bells chimed, not in panic but in welcome, for a fleet of westward traders nosing the harbor, their sails stitched with direwolf and dragon entwined. High above it all, Rhaegal and Drogon wheel in stately melody. Wingtips glimmering against lengthening twilight. No longer weapons, no longer omens. Simply guardian constellations moving through the mortal firmament. Unhurried, unafraid. Jon rests his cheek against Daenerys' silver hair. Somewhere distant, a child's laughter merges with gull cry and bell ring, forging a harmony neither ice nor fire could have sung alone. Here at last, the wheel has slowed to something almost gentle. A carousel where the past stands still just long enough for the future to leap aboard, arms open, eyes bright with unburnt promise.